You know, when the renowned psychologist and meditation master Daniel P. Brown passed away in 2022, his memorials celebrated a long and brilliant career. But they left something out. A really formative, surprising, and frankly, a pretty dangerous chapter. So let's dive into the story that his obituaries didn't tell.
It's a fascinating question, isn't it? I mean, we think of an obituary as the final word on someone, a neat summary of a life. But what happens when that official story isn't the whole story? What gets edited out? And maybe more importantly, why? That's really the core question we're digging into today.
And this is the central puzzle. Here's a man who spent his entire career studying altered states of consciousness, everything from clinical hypnosis to advanced meditation. So the complete and total silence on psychedelics is, well, it's strange. Especially because he had two incredibly powerful encounters with them, and both times it put him right in the crosshairs of the US government.
Okay, so our first story kicks off in the absolute chaos of the late 1960s and early 70s. We're not in a lab or a lecture hall here. No, this is the thick of the counterculture, where a young Dan Brown found himself standing between very vulnerable people and very real harm. As a young man, Brown was out there, organizing medical tents at huge rock concerts and protest gatherings, like the May Day protests in D.C. His mission was pretty simple: harm reduction. He was there to help people who were having difficult, scary psychedelic experiences. And we're talking about crowds of 35,000 people. This was intense frontline work. Then one night, things got dire. Brown described seeing a crowd of people who'd taken what he called strychnine acid, LSD that had been deliberately tainted with poison. People were literally convulsing. His team was just running in with stretchers, pulling people out, trying desperately to get them to ambulances. It was a full-blown medical crisis. So in the middle of all this madness, Brown's team starts asking, where is this stuff coming from? They find the dealers, and here's the part that sounds like it's from a movie. Two of them had federal badges. Federal badges. Brown pretty quickly concluded they were government agents, deliberately poisoning the crowd to create a crisis and justify a massive crackdown. And look, this wasn't just some paranoid theory. You got to remember, this was the era of COINTELPRO. That was a very real, very illegal FBI program designed to disrupt and discredit domestic political movements. And that absolutely included the anti-war counterculture. What Brown saw with his own two eyes fit the pattern of state-sponsored disruption to a T. And that crackdown he predicted? It was real, all right. Those May 1971 protests ended with over 12,000 arrests. To this day, it's the largest mass arrest in American history. So the crucial point here is, Brown didn't just read about this stuff. He saw firsthand how the government could weaponize a public health crisis to literally crush a movement. Okay, now let's jump to our second story. We're doing a total 180 here, shifting from the chaos of a protest to the controlled, sterile environment of a clinical research center. But as we're about to see, the same forces were at play, just hidden way deeper beneath the surface. Just look at this contrast for a second. On the left, you've got the protests. It's public chaos, the government is disrupting things out in the open, and Brown's role is harm reduction. On the right, you have the research. It's all clinical control, the government's role is totally covert, and Brown is a clinical researcher. I mean, they're two wildly different settings, but you're about to see a very similar hidden dynamic. So after his experiences in the protest tents, Brown wanted to understand psychedelics in a controlled setting. He gets a job at the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center, working under the one and only Stanislav Grof. And the work they were doing seemed incredibly important. They were giving high-dose LSD to terminal cancer patients to help them face death with less fear. Brown watched patients have these profoundly transformative experiences. He saw how the therapy was helping people find a real sense of peace. The work was completely groundbreaking, but there was this one question that no one even knew they should be asking at the time. Where was all the money for this coming from? Well, it wasn't until decades later that Brown finally learned the truth. The research center was being at least partially funded by the CIA, funneled through a front group that was connected to MKUltra. Yep, that MKUltra. The infamous illegal mind control program. Brown and his colleagues had absolutely no idea. They were doing life-changing therapeutic work, completely unaware they were inside an institution linked to a program built on coercion and harm. So we've got these two stories. One is about overt state violence at a protest. The other is about covert state interest in a clinical trial. On the surface, they seem completely different, right? But when you look closer, the exact same threads are running through both. This really nails the connection. In both scenarios, what's Dan Brown doing? He's trying to protect vulnerable people. First it was protesters, then it was patients. And in both scenarios, the state is the antagonist, first openly with poison and tear gas, and then secretly with hidden funding. For Brown, this was an unforgettable, real-world education in altered states and in the government's intense and often destructive interest in them.
So, how did these experiences, the ones left out of his obituary, actually end up shaping his life's work? How do they help us reconsider the legacy of this truly remarkable teacher and psychologist? After 40 years of teaching meditation, this was Brown's final judgment. He believed psychedelics could offer a genuine glimpse of a different reality, of losing your ego, of feeling interconnected. But he was crystal clear, a glimpse is not the same thing as a stable, disciplined path. It's such a powerful insight, one that was clearly forged by his direct experience with both the incredible promise and the terrifying peril of these substances. Ultimately, what these stories gave him wasn't something you can just list on a CV. It was a deep, embodied knowledge of how to protect people in altered states, and a lifelong awareness of the machinery of state interference and consciousness research, a theme that would just quietly bubble under the surface for the rest of his career.
And so we end right where we began. Why are some stories, especially the messy, complicated ones, left out of the official narrative? Well, perhaps it's because they reveal that even a life dedicated to healing and awareness can intersect with the darkest, most shadowy corners of state power. And that's a chapter worth remembering.